great to be here today to talk about a year-long project that we've been doing with Access. So my name's Ethny Childs, I'm Head of Communities and Partnerships at the Institution of Environmental Sciences, and I'm joined by
Anita Lateano. I'm a research on this project working with Access.
Yes, so we've been doing this project for almost a year now, and it's all about collaboration, and particularly around environmental social science and interdisciplinary working, so really related to a lot of the things we've been talking about this morning. I'm aware that we have a really short amount of time, so I'm going to move through the slides fairly quickly, but I'm going to give a bit of an introduction to the IES, because I think it sets the scene for this project, why we're interested in interdisciplinary working, a little bit about how this project came about, and then Anita will talk about kind of how the project's going at the moment. And finally, we thought it would be quite interesting. It's probably at this point I should admit that I'm also not a social scientist. I'm from a natural science background. So we thought it would be interesting as we're working on an interdisciplinary project and within an interdisciplinary team doing that, to do some reflections completely independently from each other around how it felt being a social scientist in the project and how it felt being a natural scientist. So we'll come towards that at the end. So a little bit about the Institution of Environmental Sciences, or the IES. If you don't know us, we're a professional membership body and a charitable organisation. We have a really broad membership. We have over 6,500 members, and they all span practice, policy and research within the environmental sector. So what that means really is our membership works across all areas of environmental sciences and in all types of organisation. So consultancy, industry, public and civil bodies, NGOs, academia, so a really broad mix of things. And my role there as Head of Communities and Partnerships is to manage our special interest groups or our communities. And you can see them listed on the slide there, and they provide a bit of a snapshot of the breadth of the kinds of work that our members work in. What's a really interesting part of my role is I get to work with experts in all of these areas, and there's been one overriding message coming from all of them, which is that they need more support for interdisciplinary working. So even within the environmental sciences as a discipline, there's a lot of siloed working between these specialist groups, between air, land and water specialists. And although they're all kind of coming up against similar challenges, they all work in different ways and are actually quite separate from each other. And that's before we even talk about working with other disciplines as well. So there's this real recognition of the need for interdisciplinary and systems thinking approaches to environmental challenges, because without them, we can't solve these complex challenges that we face, such as climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. We are finding that siloed working was still deeply embedded both within and across disciplines. And in order to kind of embed interdisciplinarity and systems thinking approaches, we need the resources in place to do so, and only then can we unlock multiple benefits across sectors and disciplines and also avoid those unintended consequences when we develop solutions. These messages also really came strongly out of the Horizon Scanning project that we did back in 2023. So this was a project looking to develop a vision for the future of environmental sciences and also how we get there. And it was a really extensive project with loads and loads of stakeholder engagement from across the sector. So I think we did over 20 events, more than 30 organisations, more than 80 speakers and more than 850 people attending our events, all feeding into this report in blue that you can see. And again, the key messages coming out was we need interdisciplinarity, we need systems thinking approaches. And in particular, the report pointed out the need for more collaboration between natural scientists and social scientists. And you can see from the quote at the bottom, that's directly from our current strategy, which highlights the importance of us working with social scientists. With this in mind, we developed a brand new conference as well for the Dialogue of Disciplines, launched in 2024, where we talked a lot about bringing together the environmental sector and related disciplines. We talked a lot around the theory of interdisciplinarity and systems thinking, but what came out most strongly was actually we need a practical resource to help us to do this in the workplace, in research, in the areas that we're working in. And it was through this that we started forging links with Access. And actually, I invited Patrick to do a webinar for us on interdisciplinary climate action a few years ago now. And it was through that we started these conversations about how we build links between natural scientists and natural environmental scientists and environmental social scientists. I attended the Access General Assembly last year, which was brilliant, and Brigitte came and spoke at our dialogue between disciplines. And it became really clear that there was a really strong strategy alignment and also shared values between our organisation and the Access Network. And so we put in a joint bid to co-develop this practical resource to support interdisciplinary working. And before I hand over to Anita, I did want to kind of flag one key thing, which is interdisciplinary is a complex word. It obviously has a very academic definition. The way we're talking about it is in its broadest possible sense, in recognition of the messages that we've had about this. So it's not just between disciplines, it's within disciplines and also between sectors, because you get really common challenges coming across all of those. I'm going to pass over to you Anita to talk about the project.
So we've been working together since October, November last year, and just reflecting when Ethny was talking and all the presentations earlier. I think timing is one thing that we know and we recognise in interdisciplinary working you need time to work together, and I think with this project time has not been in our favour. It's been a very short and snappy project, but it can be done, and hopefully this has proved that these short interdisciplinary projects can work. So our aim is to co-produce a toolkit and resources to help interdisciplinary working, or as we mentioned, as collaborative working across disciplines and sectors, is what we're calling it. How are we doing this? So over the past 6 months, we've run 4 workshops. With many of you here today being involved in those workshops, we've got over 40 co-producers working together, gathering their input and their feedback into the challenges around interdisciplinary working, what the barriers are, what the enablers are, to create these resources together. We're also collecting case studies. I guess it was really great to hear in the previous session about the importance of case studies, and that's kind of the next stage of the project we're in now, and the survey to understand these factors that influence both successful and unsuccessful interdisciplinary working. Just while on the survey, it is still open. If anyone's got any case studies or any examples that they'd like to share, please come and see us in the next break in the exhibition room, and I'll be there with a QR code for you to enter your data for us. So the toolkit is for, hopefully, all of you will find it useful. It's for anyone working in the environmental field in research, policy, or practice, who's involved in collaborative working or wants to get involved in collaborative working. After all our workshops and kind of this reflection and iteration of everything, all the conversations we've had, we've kind of drilled it down to 7 key principles to consider from conception to product delivery. And we hope it's this flexible, adaptable approach that hopefully can be used across disciplines and sectors.
Great, thanks. Just for the final minute or so, I thought we'd talk about the reflections as promised. We haven't seen each other's reflections, so it'll be interesting to see if there's any common themes. So from the kind of STEM and natural sciences perspective, there were some really interesting lessons through this project. Number one, the kind of enhanced perspectives and new knowledge that you get working with another discipline is amazing and really beneficial for how you approach your own work. This can be challenged by assumed knowledge, so I think because we're working in the same sector, in the environmental sector, you sometimes think that people are seeing it in the same way, but it's amazing the difference between how academics, policymakers, practitioners all see similar things in different ways. So kind of getting over the barrier of assumed knowledge was something we had to think about. Again, coming across new methodologies for approaching problems was a really useful thing, and kind of making people more aware of what could be done for different projects. But then sectoral differences for how they saw projects. So we talked a lot about theory of change, but actually does that language resonate with people working in consultancy? They talk more about outcomes-based approaches. So it's kind of getting across the sectoral differences and understanding. Facilitation engagement. Social scientists are amazing at facilitation engagement, so that was great to have a good mix of social and natural scientists. But then there was some communication differences, I'd say, between research and practice, and also how they approach projects. So I think that's just kind of understanding different people's experience and how they work through these, and coming up with kind of ways of working and timelines which work really well. And foundational to all of this is the importance of showing that actually there are so many shared challenges across all of us. even those working in NGOs and academics had the same challenges. The big difference is how we talk about them. So development of that shared language is absolutely fundamental in interdisciplinary working.
And this is the last slide, so hopefully we're a bit over, I know. But reflections for myself from a social scientist perspective. I mean, anyone who's joined any of the workshops, we always talk about the fact that interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary are non-linear projects, and I felt like we kind of knew this, but we went into it in a very linear way with our timeline and with our Gantt chart, and thinking it was going to be very simple, and it wasn't. So that again is, I guess, walking the walk as much as we have talked it. This idea as well that came from Clive Mitchell from Nature Scotland, kind of called collaborative working very gritty, and he really liked this idea, but I found it as gritty across disciplines as it is across sectors, or even more so. And again, kind of looking at the initial literature, there's so much about interdisciplinary working, but so much less on transdisciplinary, or what it means to be cross-sector, and that's what we're trying to produce, something that can work across sectors as well. And finally, the importance of communication and relationships. I think that was vital in this project, for any collaboration, even over kind of expertise or knowledge of separate disciplines or separate sectors. It's really that kind of relationships that you form is key to producing a successful project.
Sorry, aware we're over time. Thank you so much. We'll stop there.
Thank you. I'll hand over to Beth. And just to add, I mean, people said it before in the first session, if only the assembly had been a few weeks later, there would have been more. It's coming. Right. Oh, next one. I think.
Hi everyone, nice to be here, nice to see old faces and hopefully meet new ones. So I've just realised I need the phone but it's fine. The mainstreaming of social sciences in environmental policy and practice. So I'm a senior social scientist in forest research, previously worked in Natural England, and I'm speaking here on behalf of a very big project team. So in the spirit of speaking to someone you haven't spoken to before, if you're involved in the MOSSEPP project in any way at all, can you wave as enthusiastically as you feel you can? Right, okay. And when I mention your name during the presentation, you can wave so that people know who to talk to. So yes, so this is a very exciting project that we're very grateful to the ACCESS project for helping us to develop. So this project originates in 2019 when I joined the social sciences team in Natural England, and my attempt to understand my new role and the role of social sciences in the organisation and the wider sector. So this included, you ready for the waving? Included conversations with Cheryl Willis, who's in the room, Alison Dialogue Assembly, and Carol Morris, who's back there. And these soon developed into discussions with the Natural Environment Social Research Network, which you might hear about or know about, or NESRN. So that's an informal GB-wide network of environment agencies run by practicing social researchers or those who have a particular interest in it. And we're focused as a network on strengthening the quality, very like ACCESS really, focused on strengthening the quality and impact of social sciences and nature and environment work that we do. And so we were interested to understand what seemed to be a post-Brexit turn in the role of social sciences within our agencies and departments. So there were signs of change, including sort of an increased number of our roles being made, and sort of increasing mentions of the human dimensions in organisational strategies and documents, and new advisory bodies, which explicitly included environmental social sciences, including a new social sciences expert panel advising on environmental land management, which Ross, I can't see, was involved with, as well as Carol and Michael, Carol Morris and Michael Winter in the back. So as Michael being chair of that one, and also a new, excitingly new social science advisory panel to complement the Natural Environment Social Science Advisory Committee in Natural England. So this developed into the SIGN, or Social Sciences in the Natural Environment Project, which is a 5-year participant action research project, and it involved 19 participants from 11 environmental policy and practice organisations, or EPP organisations, which explored the expansion of UK EPP organisations' social sciences function, which has subsequently retracted in some cases, unfortunately. It also evidenced the ongoing marginalisation of social sciences within these organisations and considered where there's room for improvement to enable a more meaningful integration of the social sciences. And I encourage you to look up the Natural England published report if you want to understand the role of social sciences and social scientists in this really interesting space. And it leads on from the question that was asked at the end of the last session. What's best practices happening? Well, it's happening in the organisations where they have social scientists trying to do that role. So I really encourage you to talk to some of us in the room about where we're trying to do that translation into policy and practice. So post-project conversations with the participants evidenced the need to continue this work. It wasn't enough just to sort of show the world. So we wanted to use our learning and the strong network that we developed to practically support EPP organisations at different stages of their social sciences journey to mainstream social sciences in their organisations. And there's a definition of what we consider to be mainstreaming of social sciences here, drawn from the empirical work we did in SIGN, but also the literature. And we think it'll get achieved when social sciences are embedded in the design, implementation, monitoring, assessment of EPP organisations. They make use of the diverse insights, and there's a knowledge of and commitment to social sciences across all aspects of organisational operations and clarity of role. You haven't flashed me yet. Oh, it is fine. So NESRN is a formal partner to Access, and the Access project really brought a wealth of networks, expertise, new resources and learning. What we're trying to do is we're trying to increase the reach of environmental social sciences and building capacity and confidence like the Access project is. In particular, we've built on Work Package 1, where Access has developed resources we can draw on to support the mainstreaming, and we've developed a new impact-focused Access project, which is what I've done a long introduction on, but I think it was helpful, MOSSEPP, and Fred's going to jump up and down when I go over. So we're aiming to, like I said, further the impact and use and do this mainstreaming of social sciences in our organisations. So the core project teams in the dark purple circle, on a wave. The case study organisations are in the middle there, and then we've got a wider project network to draw on. And we did use a...
We were just waiting.
Oh, great. So the core team, basically, we've supported the case study organisations to identify a vision or visions for social sciences within their organisations, and then we've used the theory of change approach, controversial, to identify specific measurable outcomes and associated activities which can support them to achieve those visions, and specifically some of those that can be achieved within the 18-month project period. And I want to really emphasise that it's really completely up to them what they decide to focus on. We in the project network are providing ideas, but they're the ones who understand what makes most sense for their journey and where they are now. So, yeah, like I said, the wider project network's really supporting through sharing their own ideas, experiences, resources, challenges, and also hopefully gaining benefits from the learning, but also the really strong network that we're building. And it's a really wide range of people that are involved. So where have we got to? We're 12 months into the 18-month project. We had an all-network meeting in July last year to explore together what mainstream might look like and share experiences. And then since then we've been working one-to-one with case studies and as a group. And we've created a theory of change, and I expect you to be able to read that, for each case study, visioning what mainstreaming environmental social sciences looks like for them and how we might get there. So we've identified outcomes that could be achieved in the project timeframe. These are some of the outcomes here and related activities. And you'll see there's a range of outcomes that are being sought here. Some overlap and some similarities. And we worked with them to think about what's urgent, what's possible, and what takes advantage of the current support through this project, and also how we're going to measure the impact towards these outcomes. So we've also sort of the resource library and the one-to-one support. I won't, how long have I got? Right. So if you want to talk to me about any of these and what they're trying to do, please do, but there's also people in the room that are trying to do this, and so please do talk to them about what they're doing and how they're trying to get there. So we're constantly working with our membership to understand the impact the project is having on us. It's an impact project, and some of the feedback to date is on the screen. And just before this conference started, we held another face-to-face meeting where we talked through different forms of impact. And I think one of the important things to note is the roles we have in our organisations are not just research roles. They're really not. I wish I could put a slide in here, like the 30 odd different roles we identified that we take forward in our organisations, and that's really important when thinking about the impact we have. And we also talked about how we might develop some of the mainstreaming indicators that we've developed and operationalise them. Thank you very much. There's some QR codes here which I'm going to click past, but you become available with some of the previous research I mentioned, and then just to say thank you very much to all the organisations involved and to Access for facilitating it.
Yeah, I'm certainly thinking, I feel really mean because I've spent the last sort of the day really in the MOSSEPP group. Of course, spent a lot of time on the toolkits work, and I'm only giving you 10 minutes to talk about it. So please do go and talk to these people here to find out exactly what's been happening, because it's amazing, and there's a lot of really fantastic things going on. There's more slides.
Oh, that was the extra slide.
But now we're going to hand over to our three wonderful panelists, Nicky, Emily, and Karishma, and I think you each have 5 minutes or so to give your reflections, your ideas, your sort of understanding of negotiating disciplinary and sectoral boundaries. So I think you want to go first?
Yeah. Can you hear me off this mic okay? Okay, right, great. So thanks a lot for inviting me to talk today. It's really nice to be back at this event. I've been once before, it was great, so I'm really happy to come again. I'm Nicky, because we're all doing it, I think, so I'm actually an actual scientist as well. So long ago I was a physicist. I've been in publishing now for about 15 years, and I was the chief editor of Nature Energy until fairly recently, which some of you might know. So I'm going to talk a bit from the publishing perspective about what we've just been hearing about. And I think I'm just going to repeat also a lot of things that came up before, because there were some great things in also the morning session, but some themes that resonate for me that I think, from thinking about this from like an editorial publishing view, include. So one of the really interesting things is we're talking about interdisciplinarity and how difficult it is to say and how difficult it is to pronounce, to define. And one thing that I see more and more these days actually is, because I span across social sciences and natural sciences day to day, the increasing use of interdisciplinarity amongst natural scientists who have nothing to do with social scientists, and that seems like it, to me at least, creates a lot more confusion about what we mean when we talk about interdisciplinarity. So the definitions that you're kind of thinking about and publicising are really useful, but I think once we get outside of that kind of immediate environmental science, climate science space, you have two different types of chemists talking about how they're working in an interdisciplinary way with one another, and that creates confusion in the wider scientific research ecosystem. Just to reflect on this idea about mainstreaming again of social sciences a little bit, just to say, at the Nature journals, we started about 15 years ago with one social scientist in the entire organisation. Today we have at least 30, maybe a bit more than that. We have 3 on Nature alone. So I feel like in terms of how we're trying to represent what you and your wider colleagues in social sciences are concerned, we're really trying to make a lot more effort now. So I think we're feeling like it's much more mainstream. We were a STEM outfit for 160 years before this happened. So it's a really interesting journey that I think we're all going on to try to support the work you guys are doing. That brings me to what I think is then the importance of our training as editors in thinking about both how do we handle and assess social science work, how do you do that, and how do we communicate it, and how does it get peer reviewed. I think that's true for both interdisciplinary work. It's already come up a little bit, and I'm sure you've all felt that pain. What we try to do is be very reflective internally and discuss a lot internally. I think the kinds of reports and outputs that you're producing that touch on this are really valuable for us, but they're also really valuable for thinking about peer reviewers, and that's a challenge that we all face as editors, and I don't mean just in-house professional full-time editors like myself, but you as academic editors, right? So how do we think about, well, what does it take to peer review, and what's your role as an editor in overruling and judging and balancing out all of those components? I really, really want to emphasise what I heard earlier in this session and the previous one about people talking about gathering case studies and highlighting the value of case studies. I and my colleagues have read a lot of manuscripts in the past talking about the importance of social sciences for addressing policy challenges and general challenges in energy, climate and environmental science. And nearly all of them fail to point to any concrete examples, and so they don't land. So the fact that this is much more, there's more of this seeming going on and filtering into reports. Your editors will love it if you put those into your flagship, this is why this matters pieces. It's incredibly valuable. It has a lot of impact, and it's really important for communication. And the last thing I guess I'll quickly touch on is problems with incentives, again, that I think cut across both interdisciplinary working and mainstream social sciences. So both for within academia and then thinking about when you're talking about practitioners and policymakers, and how that means that, I've often tried to work with people around, well, we've got this report, we want to turn it into a journal article, or the other way around, we don't know how to do that. And there's a lot of conflict in there. And I think we recognise this within the kind of editorial space and want to help with it, because what's fantastic, I've heard so many great projects and reports upcoming. How do we unlock that for a broader audience through the kind of publishing ecosystem, through the journal ecosystem, so that it resonates much, much more widely in a disciplinary, but also I think in a kind of international sense, frankly. How can those things be translated that help others learn from all the great work that you're doing? And I'm over, so I'll stop.
Thank you.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for the invite to be on this panel. It's a really interesting panel. I love the topic. My name's Emily. I'm Head of Social Research and Evaluation at the Centre for Sustainable Energy. CSE is a charity working to tackle inequality in the energy transition. So we're working to tackle the kind of twin challenges of fuel poverty and the climate emergency. But previously to joining CSE, I was an academic. I was a social scientist working in various universities, and I only moved about 18 months ago. The fact that I was hired by the charity, I think in part stemmed from their desire to strengthen the link with academic organisations. We recently got IRO status, which means we can now kind of lead and co-I on UKRI bids, research council funding and things like that. And this is a major opportunity for us because academic funding can often be more long-term. It gives us more flexibility than other kinds of work. When you're dealing with government tenders and you're trying to turn stuff around in 3 months, that compared to a sort of 2-3 year project can make a huge difference to the way we work as a charity. So our team at CSE, we've got 24 researchers across 3 teams. We've got social research, we've got a data analytics team, which is particularly GIS mapping and modelling, and we've got software development. We work extremely hard to make sure that these aren't siloed between the 3 teams. If you're interested in that, I can talk about how we do that, but it's all a little bit boring and processy. But I just wanted to give a couple of examples of the kind of sort of cross-sector and cross-disciplinary work that we've done just this past year. So the first example I want to give is something called the Energy Choices tool. So this is a free web-based tool which basically gives households bespoke energy advice tailored to their energy behaviours, their practices, their home, their preferences. And I think this is a great example of where we basically started with the problem, which was identified by the clients that we speak to who are in fuel poverty. And their problem was they were struggling to navigate the energy market and they were struggling to find independent advice. So we started with the problem and then simply just mobilized the disciplines and the sectors that were needed to solve that problem. So we brought together social research, we did market monitoring with industry partners, we did a lot of work with community groups, with advocacy organizations, and of course there was a lot of software development for the tool itself. And we had a very long kind of iterative process where the social researchers were working with the software team to actually develop the tool. And the second example I want to give is something called CrowdFlex. So this was a major randomized controlled trial of households participating in demand flexibility, like energy demand flex. More than 100,000 households took part in an RCT. And this involved working really closely with the private sector. So we worked really closely with OVO, who are an energy supplier, and with OMI, who are a service provider. And they basically collected data from their customers who were participating in the trial. And we then combined it with our own kind of in-house longitudinal social research to just understand how energy flexibility was working for different types of customer, and particularly kind of focusing on the impacts on vulnerable groups. And so the common thread through this is this kind of real problem-led approach where you start with the problem you're trying to fix and then you just mobilize what's needed. And usually the answer to that is not a single discipline, right? And I really, really appreciated the talks. Thank you so much. They were really interesting. And I really resonate with Anita's point about it being so much more about communication and relationships over expertise and knowledge. And that importance of like ongoing communication with all of your different partners and setting your expectations, that kind of continued negotiation, not just going off, doing a whole big thing and then coming back like 3 years later and expecting people to read it, basically. And I think there's a massive opportunity here in that I think in our sector at least, kind of cross-sector and cross-discipline is often just kind of taken as assumed because social science is so fundamental to tackling most of the problems we're facing in the energy sector. And also, we aren't constrained to sit within our own discipline. Like there's no, I'll wrap up. There's no ref, and sorry, Nicky, but there's no journal publications just aren't the be-all and end-all. And so those kind of incentives to stay within your own discipline are much narrower. And just the last point that I'll make, I was thinking about some of the challenges that we face as opposed to the opportunities. And I think one of the challenges is that, so charities want to be more than just the impact partner, right? We don't want to just be brought in at the end to try and make impact out of research. Charities are increasingly playing a consultancy role with really strong research expertise and staffed with a lot of ex-academics like myself. The link with practice means we can really root our research in the challenges that our clients are actually facing and seek problems that like genuinely impact actual people's lives. So I think bringing in of charities simply to boost impact just kind of underplays the role that they can play in actually shaping research proposals from the very start. Thank you. Sorry for going over. I couldn't see you.
Thank you, Emily. I realise now that we didn't clap for Nicky. Karishma.
Hello. First of all, thank you very much for this invitation to be here today. I was a little bit surprised when I first got the invitation, but I feel very much at home now, and I'm hoping we can continue some form of engagement going forward. So I'm Karishma. I am a teaching professor of sustainability and innovation at the Department of Physics. In my department, this is a very unusual title, and I'm very delighted that my head of department went with it. But there was kind of talk of knowledge hierarchy earlier in the day, and definitely this is on the very, very softer end of what we can do with physicists. And there are things that I would talk to my students about that I very carefully tread with in terms of what I can speak to my colleagues about. Anyway, so my interdisciplinary experience is kind of along 3 different axes, if I can say that. The first one is of the kind that Nicky was mentioning. For the last more than 10 years, I've been running this Center for Doctoral Training in Nanoscience and Nanotechnology, and we are all about interdisciplinarity across physics, chemistry, material science, engineering, and biology as well. And so many of the problems that were Ethny and Anita were talking about are things that we've kind of confronted. And because it's a doctoral training program and we invite students saying that, you will be thrown into all these different disciplines and you will learn the language of different disciplines, and that's kind of a requirement. They go along with it, and we've structured things such that learning the language and being comfortable with being uncomfortable in a new area is something that is expected. So that's worked really well for us. I would encourage where possible, but I know it requires resource to be able to kind of organize short projects for well-designed projects for someone to go off and do in a completely different area. But there's a lot of merit to be had from that kind of experience. So that nanoscience, interdisciplinary across the sciences, is one of my kind of my bread and butter day jobs type of thing, so to speak. Then over the last several years, and this comes from a kind of a place of just natural interest, I have been engaging with the humanities and social sciences because I felt some kind of incompleteness in the kind of work we do in the sciences. And particularly, I describe my work in that direction as developing a more holistic notion of sustainability to bring back to the sciences. So I'm very much firmly intending to stay in the science department, but bring in this additional knowledge that exists and is very important and include it in our education for scientists, which I have been able to do. And I'm getting students to kind of include kind of this thinking in what I call a more complex space for problem solving, because physicists are used to problem solving in a very neat and tidy space, and that makes them comfortable. But a messier space is a more challenging problem, so I throw it out as a challenge, and that seems to be working all right for the moment. I also have some interaction with industry as part of my work at the Nano DTC and the department more broadly, and that brings in the kinds of things that came up earlier about differences in culture, differences in priorities, differences in incentives, and so a whole range of interdisciplinary experience. But I suppose what I want to talk about most is when wanting to cross interdisciplinary boundaries, that it's important for us to think about why people are responding in the way that they do. So why are the people who really believe in numbers, why are they doing that? And there's a lot that comes from the training that those people have had, but there are also kind of notions of what is more easily accepted as something that will satisfy the accountability box. So if you have a story upon which you have based a decision, then it creates a kind of discomfort in people. But if you can say, I found that 50% people said yes, and that's why I decided that, then the person who is making the decision feels more protected. So taking that into account and then approaching the problem, it's a very challenging problem, but taking that into account to address the problem of numbers versus stories would be something that I'd be interested in having that conversation about. So I think I saw the 1 minute sign, so maybe I should stop here. All right, thank you.